Pretend you're my daughter's fiancé.
The old woman chose him the way fate often does, quietly, suddenly, and without asking permission. Daniel Rahman didn't notice the moment his life tilted in a new direction. If someone had told him that a single whispered sentence over a cup of cooling tea would redraw the edges of his lonely world, he would have laughed politely and gone back to staring out the window. Fate, after all, had already taken enough from him. It wasn't supposed to give anything back. Yet there he was, on a rainy afternoon, about to be pulled into a stranger's desperate lie that would refuse to remain just a lie. Daniel had been coming to the tea house for almost a year. It sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd, wedged between a shuttered bookstore and a tailor shop that always smelled faintly of dust and steam. The tea house didn't advertise. It didn't need to. People who needed quiet somehow found it, and people who didn't never noticed it existed. Inside, the lights were warm and dim, the walls lined with cracked photographs of places that might or might not have been real. The tables didn't match, the chairs complained when you sat on them, and the air carried the comforting bitterness of brewed leaves and old wood. Daniel always came at 4:30. It was the hour between responsibility and obligation after he dropped his 6-year-old son Amir at Mrs. Collins's apartment for tutoring, and before he had to pick him up and return to the structured rhythm of dinner homework and bedtime stories. That hour was Daniel's alone. He guarded it fiercely. He took the same seat every time, the one near the window where rain streaked down the glass like melting lines of memory. He ordered black tea, no sugar, and kept his phone face down on the table. He wasn't waiting for messages. He rarely was. Grief had taught him not to expect interruptions. 3 years earlier, cancer had taken his wife Sarah with brutal efficiency. One moment she had been laughing at Amir's mispronunciations, the next she was too tired to lift her head. Daniel remembered hospital hallways, the smell of antiseptic, the way time collapsed into beeping machines and whispered reassurances that never quite convinced anyone. After the funeral, life hadn't shattered, it had narrowed. Daniel became 2 people instead of 1, a father who smiled, cooked meals, and tied shoelaces, and a man who learned how to carry silence without letting it show. Friends checked in at first, then less often. Then hardly at all, no one meant harm. Life simply moved on as it always did. Daniel stayed still. That afternoon, rain tapped softly against the windows, a patient, persistent rhythm. Daniel wrapped his hands around the teacup, letting the warmth seep into his palms. Outside, umbrellas bobbed past, people rushing somewhere important. He wondered, not for the first time, if he would ever rush again. "Excuse me," the voice was gentle, almost apologetic. Daniel looked up, surprised to find an elderly woman standing beside his table. He was certain the chair across from him had been empty moments earlier. "Yes?" he said politely. She gestured to the chair. "May I?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." She sat carefully, smoothing a faded blue shawl around her shoulders. Her hair was silver, braided neatly down her back, and her posture was straighter than many people half her age. There was a calm dignity about her, as though she was accustomed to being listened to, even when she spoke softly. Daniel offered a polite smile and returned his attention to the window. Strangers sometimes shared tables here when the place was busy. It wasn't unusual. He lifted the teacup to his lips. That was when she leaned closer. "Please," she whispered. "Pretend you're my daughter's fiancé." The cup froze halfway to his mouth. Daniel turned slowly, convinced he had misheard. "I'm sorry?" Her eyes flicked toward the entrance. "They're coming," she murmured. "I need you to stand when I say your name. Smile, say you're engaged to my daughter. Please." Daniel followed her gaze. 2 men had just entered the tea house. They were both tall, both wearing dark coats damp with rain. They didn't sit. Instead, they scanned the room with sharp, assessing eyes before approaching the counter. The owner spoke to them briefly, then gestured vaguely toward the seating area. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. "I don't understand," he said under his breath. "Who are they?" "My brothers," the woman replied quietly. "Or what's left of them?" That answer sent a ripple of unease through him. One of the men glanced in their direction, his gaze lingering just long enough to be uncomfortable. Daniel shifted in his seat. I think you've made a mistake, he said. I wouldn't ask if I had another choice, she interrupted softly. They think my daughter is disgracing the family. They believe she is alone, vulnerable. Daniel frowned. And she isn't? She is, the woman said. But they don't need to know that. The men were moving closer now, their footsteps slow and deliberate. Daniel's instincts screamed at him to stand up and leave. He had a son waiting, a schedule to keep, a life that did not include pretending to be someone else for a stranger with dangerous relatives. Yet when he looked at the woman beside him, he didn't see manipulation. He saw exhaustion. The kind that came from years of defending someone you love against people who believe they owned you. She met his eyes, and in that moment, something in her expression reminded him of Sarah, of the way she had looked at him once. In a grocery store parking lot when a stranger had been rude to Amir, the silent plea that said, "Please stand with me." 5 minutes, the woman whispered. That's all. Then I'll disappear from your life, Daniel exhaled slowly. All right, he said. 5 minutes. Relief crossed her face so quickly it was almost painful to see. The men stopped at their table. Auntie, the taller one said, his voice stiff. We've been looking for you, the woman smiled warmly. I told you I had company, she turned toward Daniel. Ah, Daniel, dear. You're late. Daniel stood, his legs feeling strangely unsteady. Sorry, he said automatically. Traffic, he extended his hand. Daniel Rahman, the brothers looked him over with open skepticism. And you are? The shorter one asked. My daughter's fiancé, the woman said before Daniel could speak. Daniel nodded. Engaged, yes. The silence that followed was thick enough to press against his chest. The men exchanged glances. No one informed us, the taller one said. Because you do not listen, the woman replied calmly. You only accuse? Their eyes returned to Daniel, sharper now. What do you do? One asked. I'm an accountant, Daniel said. Then, without planning to, he added, and I'm a single father. The word surprised him as much as them. A father? The man repeated. Daniel nodded. My wife passed away. Something shifted. It was subtle, but Daniel felt it, the suspicion loosening, replaced by a discomfort that came from judging a man who had already lost enough. The woman placed her hand lightly on Daniel's arm. My daughter is not alone, she said firmly. She is loved. The brothers hesitated, muttered something that sounded like an apology, and stepped back. Within moments, they were gone, the door swinging shut behind them with a soft jingle. Daniel sat down heavily, his pulse roaring in his ears. Daniel rubbed his temples. That was unexpected, she smiled. Life often is. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain filling the space between them. I'm Farah, she said at last. And my daughter is Lena. Daniel, he replied. My son is Amir. Farah's eyes softened. How old? 6, she nodded slowly. My Lena is 32. Still my child? Daniel found himself smiling despite the lingering tension. They talked then, not deeply, not yet. Just enough to make the moment human rather than strange, about tea. About the neighborhood. About how places hold memories even when people try to forget them. When Daniel finally stood to leave, Farah surprised him by pressing a small piece of paper into his hand. My number, she said. In case you ever want tea with company, Daniel hesitated, then slipped it into his pocket. I'd like that, he said. As he stepped back into the rain, Daniel had the unsettling feeling that his carefully guarded hour of solitude had just been broken open. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he wanted to put it back together. Daniel told himself that he would not go back to the tea house the next day. He repeated it in his head while helping Amir with homework, while stirring lentils on the stove, while tucking his son into bed and listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing settle into sleep. The old woman's request, the brother's sharp eyes, the strange rush of adrenaline, it all belonged to a moment he had already given enough of himself to. His life worked because it was contained. Yet the following afternoon, at exactly 4:30, Daniel found himself standing at the familiar corner of Maple and 3rd, rain or no rain, hand already pushing the door open. He told himself it was coincidence, habit, curiosity at most, Farah was already there. She sat at a table near the window, hands folded neatly around her teacup, as though she had known he would come. When she saw him, her face brightened, not dramatically. Not desperately, but with a quiet warmth that made something in Daniel's chest loosen. "You came," she said. "So did you," Daniel replied, pulling out the chair across from her. "Of course," she said. "This place has good memory." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Tea houses have memories now," she smiled. "All places do if you sit long enough." They ordered tea without discussing it. The owner nodded as if this arrangement had existed for years. For a few minutes, they simply drank in silence. Daniel realized he didn't feel awkward. That surprised him. "Did your brothers bother you after yesterday?" he asked finally. Farah shook her head. "They rarely do anything directly. Their power is in expectation," Daniel nodded. He understood that better than he wanted to. "My family had expectations too," he said. "About how long I should grieve. About when I should move on." "And did you?" Farah asked gently. Daniel looked into his cup. No, she didn't push. She never seemed to. Instead, she told him about Lena, about how Lena had always been stubborn. Even as a child, how she once refused to wear a dress to a wedding and sat on the floor until Farah gave in. About how she had chosen physical therapy over the more respectable professions the family approved of. About how she moved to another city for work and freedom in equal measure. "They think she abandoned us," Farah said quietly. "But I think she saved herself." Daniel felt something tighten in his throat. Amir asked questions like that, sometimes questions about why his mother had to leave, why she didn't fight harder, why Daniel didn't have answers that made the world feel fair again. "What do you tell them?" Daniel asked. "Your brothers. That I raised my daughter to stand on her own," Farah said. "And that I am proud of her." Daniel smiled faintly. "That must make them angry." "It does," she agreed. "But anger is easier to live with than regret." Their conversations became routine after that. Farah would call once or twice a week, her voice calm and steady, asking if Daniel was free for tea. Sometimes he was. Sometimes he wasn't. There was never pressure, only invitation. They spoke of small things, weather, food, books Farah had read decades ago and still remembered clearly. Then, gradually, the talk deepened. One afternoon, as rain rattled against the windows with unusual insistence, Farah asked, "Do you still talk to her?" Daniel didn't need to ask who. "Yes," he said, "in my head. Sometimes out loud." "Does that help?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "Sometimes it hurts more," Farah nodded. "Love does not disappear when a body does." Daniel swallowed. "People tell me I should be stronger. For Amir," Farah leaned forward. "Strength is not silence." That sentence stayed with him. A week later, Farah surprised him by asking if Amir would like to join them someday. Daniel hesitated. He guarded Amir carefully. "Not from danger, but from disappointment. He's shy," Daniel said. "So was Lena," Farah replied. "Still is." Shyness is not weakness. The following Saturday, Daniel brought Amir to the tea house. Amir clung to Daniel's hand at first, eyes wide as he took in the unfamiliar space. Farah greeted him as if she had been waiting her entire life for that moment. "You must be Amir," she said, kneeling slightly so she was closer to his eye level. Amir nodded solemnly. "I'm Farah," she said. "Would you like something sweet with your tea?" His eyes flicked to Daniel for approval. Daniel nodded. That was all it took? Farah listened to Amir's stories about school, about dinosaurs, about how his father sometimes burned toast and pretended it was on purpose with complete attention. No interruptions. No polite distractions. Daniel watched from across the table, something warm and unfamiliar spreading through his chest. Later that evening, Amir asked, "Is she my grandma?" Daniel paused. "No, but she's kind." Amir considered this. "That's good too." Soon after, Lena appeared not in person but on a screen. Farah called Daniel one evening, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Lena wants to see the man who saved her reputation." Daniel laughed despite himself. "Tell her it was purely accidental." The video call connected, and Lena's face filled the screen-sharp eyes, warm smile, hair pulled back casually. She looked normal, real. "So you're my fiancé," Lena said dryly. "Only temporarily," Daniel replied. She laughed, the sound easy and genuine. Thank you. My uncles haven't bothered me since. They spoke awkwardly at first, then more naturally. Amir waved shyly from the background. Lena waved back, treating him like a person rather than a prop. After the call ended, Daniel felt oddly energized. Weeks passed. Tea turned into meals. Conversations stretched longer. Amir grew comfortable enough to wander the tea house while Daniel and Farah talked. Lena called more often, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. One afternoon, Farah watched Daniel help Amir with a small math puzzle. You are doing well, she said quietly. Daniel sighed. I don't feel like I am. Feelings are unreliable judges, Farah said. Children are not. Daniel looked at his son, focused, secure, quietly happy in that moment. For the first time in a long while, Daniel allowed himself to believe that perhaps he was not failing as badly as he feared. One evening, as they prepared to leave, Farah paused. My daughter is visiting next month, she said. Would you like to meet her properly? Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Yes, Farah smiled, satisfied but unsurprised. As Daniel walked home with Amir that night, hand in hand beneath the city lights, he realized something had shifted. His days were still full of responsibility, his grief still existed, but it no longer sat alone at the table with him. And that, he understood, was how healing often began, not loudly, not all at once, but quietly, over tea, in the presence of people who chose to stay. The day Lena arrived, Daniel woke before his alarm. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muted sounds of the city coming alive outside his window. Amir was still asleep in the next room, his soft snores drifting through the thin wall. Daniel felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest, not dread, not exactly excitement, but something suspended between the two. He told himself it was nothing. Lena was simply Farah's daughter, a woman he had spoken to on video calls. A character in an accidental story that had already served its purpose. She would visit, they would be polite, perhaps share tea, and then life would return to its careful shape. That was the plan. Reality, as usual, had other ideas. Lena arrived at the tea house in the early afternoon. Daniel recognized her immediately, even before Farah stood to greet her. She moved with an easy confidence, scanning the room with curiosity rather than caution. She wore a simple coat, jeans, and comfortable shoes, nothing that tried to impress. When her eyes landed on Daniel, she smiled, not the polite smile of obligation, but one that reached her eyes. So, she said, stopping in front of him, you exist in 3 dimensions. Daniel laughed, tension loosening from his shoulders. Apparently, Farah hugged her daughter tightly, murmuring something in her ear that Daniel couldn't hear but didn't need to. Lena hugged her back just as firmly, resting her forehead against Farah's for a brief moment before pulling away. And you must be Amir, Lena said, turning to Daniel's son. Amir froze, then nodded. I've heard a lot about you, she continued. Mostly good things. That earned a small smile. They sat together, awkward at first, then less so. Tea arrived. Amir showed Lena his favorite drawing. Lena praised it sincerely, asking questions that showed she actually cared about the answers. Daniel noticed how naturally she included Amir without centering him as a novelty or burden. She didn't overdo it. She simply treated him as part of the room. It was disarming. Over the next few days, Lena stayed with Farah. Daniel joined them often, sometimes for tea, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to walk through the neighborhood. There was no official announcement, no declaration of what they were doing or why. They simply spent time, and Daniel realized something unsettling. He liked it. He liked Lena's dry humor, the way she observed before speaking, the way she challenged Farah gently rather than obediently. He liked that she asked about his work and actually listened. He liked the way she spoke to Amir, not as a replacement mother, not as a visitor passing through, but as a person building trust brick by brick. One evening, as Amir chased pigeons in the park nearby, Lena sat beside Daniel on a bench. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? Daniel asked. For not disappearing after the tea house incident, she said. Most people would have, Daniel considered that. Most people didn't have anything tying them to stay, Lena smiled faintly. You did? I didn't realize it at the time, he admitted. But yes, They sat in comfortable silence, watching Amir laugh as the birds fluttered away. "My uncles still think we're engaged," Lena said after a moment. Daniel winced. "I'm sorry about that." She shook her head. "Don't be. It gave me space. And time. For what?" "For deciding what I actually want," she said. The words lingered. As the days passed, pretending became unnecessary, but the closeness remained. Daniel found himself looking forward to Lena's messages. Found himself wondering what she would think about small things, what book to read next, whether a movie was worth watching, how to explain loss to a child without scaring them. One evening, Lena stayed late enough that Amir fell asleep on the couch between them. Daniel went to lift him, but Lena gently stopped him. "I've got him," she carried Amir with surprising ease. Settling him carefully onto the bed Daniel had set up in Farah's spare room, she tucked the blanket around him with practiced care. "You're good at that," Daniel said softly. She shrugged. "I work with injured people all day. You learn how to move gently." "No," he said, "I meant..." Emotionally, she met his gaze. Something open passed between them, recognition, perhaps. "I had to grow up early," she said. "So did you?" Daniel nodded. That night, as he lay awake, he realized how long it had been since he had shared silence with someone who understood it. Farah watched them quietly. She noticed the way Daniel lingered when Lena entered a room, the way Lena's voice softened when she spoke to Amir, the way the air shifted subtly when the three of them were together. She said nothing, but her eyes held a knowing warmth. One afternoon she asked Daniel to walk with her alone. "You are careful," Farah said as they strolled slowly down the street. "Yes," Daniel replied. "I have to be." "So does Lena," she said. "But careful people still deserve joy." Daniel stopped walking. "I don't want to confuse Amir," Farah turned to him. "Children are confused by dishonesty, not by love." That night, Daniel lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, Farah's words echoing in his mind. Lena's visit was supposed to last 2 weeks. At the end of the first, Daniel felt an unfamiliar anxiety creeping in, not about the future, but about the possibility of returning to the past. One evening, Lena found him washing dishes alone. "You're quiet," she observed. "Just tired," he said automatically. She studied him. "You don't have to protect me from your thoughts." Daniel turned off the water. "I'm afraid of wanting something I can't keep." Lena leaned against the counter. "I'm afraid of staying where I don't belong." They stood there, neither moving closer nor stepping away. "Does this feel like pretending to you?" Lena asked softly. Daniel shook his head. "No, then maybe," she said. "We should stop calling it that." The moment that changed everything came unexpectedly. Amir had a nightmare. Daniel woke to his son's muffled sobs, panic slicing through his half-sleep. He rushed to Amir's room, kneeling beside the bed, pulling him into his arms. "She left again," Amir whispered. "Mama left again." Daniel held him tightly, heart breaking all over. Lena stood in the doorway, unsure whether to enter. Daniel looked up at her, desperation and vulnerability laid bare. "Can you," he began, then stopped. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't." Lena stepped forward without hesitation. She sat beside Amir, her voice calm and steady. "Your mama didn't leave because she wanted to," she said gently. "She left because she was sick. And she loved you the whole time," Amir sniffed. "How do you know?" "Because I can see it," Lena said, placing a hand over his heart. "Right there," Amir quieted slowly, his breathing evening out. When he finally fell asleep again, Daniel stepped out of the room, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You don't have to," Lena replied. "I wanted to be there." That was the moment Daniel realized something undeniable. He trusted her. The next morning, Lena's phone rang. It was her job. They needed her back sooner than expected. She listened quietly, then hung up. "I have to leave in 2 days," she said. Daniel felt the news like a physical blow. "Oh," he said. "Of course." They spent the remaining time together with an intensity neither acknowledged out loud. Long walks, shared meals, quiet glances that said more than words. On Lena's last evening, Farah suggested tea at the familiar place. They sat at the same table where it had all begun. "You know," Farah said softly, "this place has seen many stories. Few of them choose honesty." Lena reached across the table. resting her hand lightly on Daniel's. "I don't know what happens next," she said. "But I don't want this to disappear." Daniel covered her hand with his own. "It won't," he said. "Not if we don't let it." As they left the tea house that night, Daniel realized something profound. What began as a lie had not turned into truth because of time alone, but because of care, courage, and the willingness to let someone see you when you were no longer pretending to be whole. And that realization scared him, because now he had something real to lose. The morning after Lena left, the apartment felt too quiet. Daniel noticed it immediately, not as silence, but as absence. The refrigerator hummed, the pipes clicked faintly, the city murmured beyond the windows, yet something essential was missing, like a note held too long and then released. Amir sat at the kitchen table, swinging his legs as he ate cereal. "Is Lena going to call today?" he asked casually, as if asking about the weather. Daniel paused mid-sip of coffee. "Maybe," he said. "She has work." Amir nodded, satisfied. Children accepted distance more easily when love had been made solid first. After dropping Amir at school, Daniel walked instead of driving. He passed the tea house without going in. It felt wrong to enter it alone now, like stepping into a room where echoes still remembered voices. He went to work, answered emails, balanced accounts, did everything expected of him. But beneath the numbers ran a quiet current of fear. He had let himself want again. That night, Lena called. They spoke about nothing important: traffic, her patients, Amir's math test, but when the call ended, Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, phone still warm in his hand, and realized how thin the line was between connection and loss. Weeks passed. Lena came back once, briefly, then again a month later. Each visit slipped seamlessly into the rhythm they had built, as though time apart merely folded itself into something deeper rather than breaking it. Farah watched them carefully. One afternoon, while Amir napped and Lena ran errands, Farah poured tea at her small kitchen table and motioned for Daniel to sit. "You are afraid," she said, not unkindly. Daniel sighed. "I don't want to build something Amir might lose." Farah stirred her tea slowly. "You already taught him how to lose. Now teach him how to keep." Daniel looked down at his hands. "What if I fail?" "You will," she said simply. "And you will also succeed. That is living." Her certainty unsettled him more than doubt ever could. The call from Lena came on a Tuesday. "I've been offered a position here," she said, breathless. "Full-time, permanent." Daniel's heart raced. "That's congratulations. There's a condition," she added. He waited. "They want me to relocate, fully." Daniel leaned against the counter. "You're already there. I mean, stay there. Build my life there." The truth settled between them. "Oh," he said quietly. "I haven't accepted," Lena continued. "Not yet." Daniel closed his eyes. "You should. It's a good opportunity." There was a pause on the line. "I didn't ask what I should do," Lena said gently. "I asked what you wanted." The words struck deeper than any argument. "I want you to have everything you deserve," Daniel said. "And what about what you deserve?" she asked. He didn't answer. The uncles returned in winter. Daniel found Farah sitting in the tea house again, her posture rigid, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The brothers stood nearby, voices low but sharp. Daniel walked straight to her side. "Daniel," Farah said, relief softening her eyes. "Is everything all right?" he asked, already knowing the answer. The taller brother turned. "We hear your engagement has been extended." Daniel met his gaze steadily. "We are not pretending anymore," the man scoffed. "Then where is she?" "Building her life," Daniel replied. "With our support?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Farah stood. "You will not threaten my daughter again." One brother opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Something in Farah's voice, quiet, unyielding, ended the conversation. They left without another word. Farah exhaled shakily. "You didn't have to do that," she said. Daniel took her hand. "Yes, I did." That evening, Daniel sat with Amir on the couch, reading a story. "Papa," Amir said suddenly. "Yes? Is Lena a part of our family?" Daniel closed the book slowly. "Would you like her to be?" he asked. Amir nodded without hesitation. "She makes you smile." Daniel laughed softly, tears blurring his vision. "That's true." Amir leaned against him. "Mama would like her." That was the moment Daniel understood. Love did not erase loss. It carried it forward gently, like a photograph kept in a safe pocket. Daniel flew to see Lena 2 weeks later. She met him at the airport, surprise giving way to recognition the moment she saw his face. "You came," she said. "I couldn't not," he replied. They walked through the city, hands brushing, words tumbling out, fears, hopes, practical concerns. They argued gently, honestly, without hiding behind politeness. "I won't ask you to leave, Amir," Lena said. "I won't ask you to give up your work," Daniel replied. They stopped at a small cafe, snow falling outside the window. "So what does that leave us?" Lena asked. Daniel took a breath. "Trying," she smiled, eyes shining. "That's all I wanted." Spring arrived quietly. Lena moved back, not fully, not yet, but enough. She negotiated flexible work. Daniel rearranged his schedule. Amir adjusted with the resilient grace only children possess. One afternoon, they sat together in the tea house, Farah, Daniel, Lena, and Amir all at the same table. Farah watched Amir stir sugar into his cup with intense concentration. "You know," she said softly, "you don't have to pretend anymore." Daniel smiled. "I know." Lena reached for his hand, and this time there was no question in her eyes, only certainty. Outside, the rain began again, gentle and familiar. Daniel looked around the table and felt something settle into place. Not perfection, not certainty, but belonging. And for the first time since loss had narrowed his world, Daniel understood that love did not arrive loudly or dramatically. Sometimes it arrived as a whisper over tea, asking you to pretend, and stayed because you chose not to.